Was a slip of the hand or a glitch in the gear that sent your shot astray? Welcome back, archers, to another episode of Archer Talk 101. I'm your host, Roy Canterbury, and today we're focusing on the critical aspects of archery that can make or break your experience, inspecting your equipment and maintenance. That's one of the things that we need to always be aware of. So before we dive into today's topic, remember that you can watch the podcast live on Archer Talk 101 Facebook group. Replay is also available in that group as well as you can go out to my YouTube channel, Learn to Fix It Yourself, and you can watch them there. Or you can go out to archertalk101.com. There you can also watch these podcasts as well as other information that you can get, there on archery. Now, if you prefer to listen to it, in audio, uh, whether you're driving or something else, Spotify is a good place to go, as well as you can get it on audible.com. So now you know where you can listen to it and watch it. Let's get into what's going on. Now, before we get started with that, this podcast was supposed to come out last Friday instead of Monday. But something I want to let everybody know, everybody talks about heart attacks and, the signs for that. Nobody talks about, how to look for blockage in your arteries. That's what going through and going to get fixed. What was happening is you're doing something that you normally do, and all of a sudden you don't have the energy for it. That could be a sign. Or if all of a sudden your heart start beating really hard and your heart rate goes up, that could be a sign of blockage and not necessarily a heart attack. So if that's something happened to you, make sure you get it checked out really quick. Now let's get into the main part of the show here. We're going to talk about how to maintain and how to inspect your equipment. We're going to start off with compound bows. We have a lot of archers out there using compound bows. So let's start off with the limbs. You want to start off with a visual inspection. To do that, look closely along the length of each of the limbs for signs of cracks. Splits or delamination. Pay special attention to where the limb pockets are at and the cam interfaces. Now, one of the things you can do to do that, you can gently flex the limbs to ensure that, they move uniformly, as you're drawing for it, listen for sounds that aren't normal. That could indicate, if there's a little creaking sound, it could indicate internal damage, or it could just indicate that your limb pockets need to be lubed. One of the things that I used to do on inspecting limbs, especially when they come in the shop and the strings are off, the strings are broke, could be a dry fire. A lot of times, if the bow tech asks you, was it dry fired? And you say no, we're just going to put it back together. There could be some damage showing up. So if you did dry fire it, make sure you tell the tech that it was dry fired. We've all done it. So it's just something. And so we'll check closer. One of the things you can do is take a cotton swab and run it up and down the limb, and it'll catch on any little things that you can't see. You may not want to run your fingers on it because if it is sticking out, you can stick that fiberglass little piece of that thing into your finger. But the cotton, cotton swabs will pick that up and catch it. And if it catches it, you can see it. The other thing is you could put like a denatured alcohol on it. Um, and wipe it off, and you can see stuff there sometimes. So that's one of the things that you can do. Check for cracks. As your bows get older, you can develop those things just from using it. If you store your bow in a hot environment, like in the back seat of your car, it can also start delaminating. So that's something you want to do. Make sure you inspect those periodically. Do you have to inspect it every time you shoot? Yeah, probably not. Um, that's just something that you want to do, at least, at least every year before you start shooting, if you put them up. And if you shoot them a lot, then you want to inspect them, maybe instead of once a year, every 6 months or every month or every week. Depends on how much you're shooting. Now, let's go into the cams. That's another thing that we're going to look at too. Now, if it's dry fired, your cam could be wrecked as well as your axle bent. you know, when you think about it, if you pull out an axle that's bent, how does a hardened steel axle get bent? Dry fire. So if you're looking at your stuff and it seems to be not rotating smoothly, you know, if you have a bow press, can take it out, take it to the shop, and if the axle's bent, there's a good chance that it was probably dry fired, maybe not by you, but maybe somebody else picked it up and dry fired it. But what you want to do is slowly draw the bow and look at the cams. Make sure they're rotating smoothly without any jerking or any noise. It's best if you have somebody help you. So as you're slowly drawing the bow back, if you can't slowly draw it back, it's probably too much weight for you anyway. So you want to make sure you can draw it back and take a look at, have some look at the cams, make sure they're moving smoothly. There's no noise. The noise could be you just need to clean and lube the axles. It could be hanging up because it needs lubricating. So that's something that you want to look at. It could be that there's not a defect, it's just dry and hanging up. So that's something you want to do periodically as well. Go through that inspection. Especially, after hunting season, maybe that's the time, if you do a lot of hunting, you're getting outside, you got a lot of dirt and stuff, when you're getting ready to shoot it, for the summertime, go and have it inspected. Make sure that you don't have, any of the burrs from, being out in the forest that's in there catching up. Then you want to check for alignment, make sure they're aligned correctly and not leaning past specs to one side or the other. That could affect the performance. If your cam is leaning too far, it could easily derail the string when you shoot. That's the other thing too, is when you draw back, you let down, make sure you're not gripping that bow and torquing that riser. If you do, you let down, you can take it right off the cams. You want to make sure that they're lined up. That's something you can do. That's easy to check. If you start shooting and it starts feeling a little different, that's something you can check. Your limbs and your cams. Now let's go into the strings and cables. Frayed strings and cables. Now the older bows used steel cables, and there really wasn't much for those. But then all the new bows now, they use string for their cables and strings. It's a string material. You want to check and make sure there's no fraying in there, broken strands. Even minor damage can lead to a failure, when it's under tension, because you draw it back and all that tension goes into, the string, minus what you're putting into the arrow. So you want to check at that and see. Now, if you have a peep and it splits around both sides of the peep, and all of a sudden it's not going around both sides, you probably have some broken strands, and that's time, don't shoot your bow anymore and get that string replaced. Now, I've seen strings that are just a few months old and they're all frayed because they did not wax the strings. You want to regularly wax the strings. That's a good point of maintaining that life of that string. If they appear dry or fuzzy, you've kind of went too far at not waxing it. You're not going to over wax it. You can put too much wax on, but you wax it, you rub it in. I suggest putting it on the string, whatever string it is, whether it's a tube or the paste, the scorpion wax is actually pretty good. Just dip your finger in it and rub it up and down on the string, and then you'll feel it. You'll feel any defects that could be in the string as your fingers are moving on the string. And then also the heat from your fingers and the friction will melt that wax into the string. You're not going to get it too hot and hurt the string, because your fingers are going to burn before you can hurt the string. That's why, like the strings, like the scorpion string wax comes with a piece of leather. Throw that leather away. Don't ever use it, because what you can do is you can start, as you're trying to melt that wax, put it in, you can actually be burning the fibers and actually making it worse. So just use your fingers. It won't hurt your fingers. It's actually kind of good on your fingers because it's a wax. Won't hurt it. And then take a look at your axle length. Measure it periodically. You know what your bow's supposed to be. The bow specs say it's going to be 36 inches, and it should be 36 inches. And if all of a sudden it's starting to get longer and longer, then it could indicate that your string is stretching, and it's stretched beyond, what it should be. Or when it's put on, it wasn't put on to the correct length. You can twist them and untwist them to get that, that right length so the dry axle is good. That's, that measurement, if that changes, it's gonna indicate some indication too. It could be, on the worst case, limbs or cam could be causing it, but generally it's the string stretching because that's the most wearable part of your bow. Now, draw weight, you want to check your draw weight periodically. If you have a draw weight scale, use that scale and test it. You know what your draw weight is at your pole, and if all of a sudden it changes, then you want to see, okay, why is it changing? A longer string or a shorter string is going to change your draw weight. And, if your limbs are getting weaker as you're drawing them back, it may not be there. What I had happen on me one time is the riser was actually breaking and it was changing every time I shoot, the sights were different. Well, your draw weight's going to change because now they're starting to flex or twist. Your cam's being out of alignment. Now, the new modern bows, chance of that break, the riser itself breaking is pretty slim. This is one of those poured magnesium risers, is a poured one, so there could be a defect in the pouring. But the new risers, they're all extruded aluminum, and you're not going to have that kind of problem with them. Uh, Now, don't forget checking your arrow rest. You want to make sure that the arrow rests firmly, on it. It's not loose. You want to make sure that it sits on there, and when you put your arrow on there, it stays where it's supposed to be. Depending what type of rest you have, if you have one of the two-prong ones, you should be able to turn that bow, a little bit each way and not have it fall off. If it falls off, then they're probably too close together. If it won't stay in, if it keeps falling down as you draw it, it's too far apart. So you want to make sure that is there. Make sure it's on there tight, because if the rest itself is loose, and tighten those bolts down, make sure they're nice and tight. One of the things that I have done for years is if you're having trouble with that bolt tightening up, don't keep tightening it down tighter and tighter. All you're going to do is strip out the riser, and then you have other problems. Take that bolt out. Take some candle wax or any kind of a paraffin wax and put on them threads, put it back in. It's going to stay tight for you. You won't have to keep cranking it down. And you want to make sure you know what the alignment of your arrow is. You want to check it, make sure that nothing has changed. Um, if I like to take when I'm setting them up, the lower end bows, yeah, you can pretty much, and not all of them, you can pretty much line them up. Have your string going down the center of the upper and lower limb, and it should go straight through the pins, and then your arrow clear out to the tip. That should line up. They'll give you a quick check. Look at it from the side. That should be a right angle between your arrow and your string. That's a quick check you can do. Hold it up, look, and see, does it line up? Is it moved in or out? That's a quick check you can do. And then, general maintenance. You know, you want to lubricate the axles and bushings and other moving parts, prevent wear and corrosion. If you're out in the water, you have a little bit of lubricant on it, it's not likely going to corrode. A lot of the screws end up having rust on them if you get out and wet and put them on there. Um, Axles and bushings, you may need to, have some with a bow press. They can actually press it, pull out the axles, clean them, lube them, put them back in. Not something you have to do a lot, but maybe once a year you take and you get all that stuff cleaned so throughout the summer you're good, or do it right before hunting season. Wherever you feel comfortable doing it, make sure you do that. You want to check the tightness of your bolts and screws periodically. Just make sure they're tight. Now, if you use the wax trick that I just told you about, you're not likely going to have them get loose on you. I've had, many times I put them in and I don't have to worry, they don't come loose. So that's something I learned many, many years ago when I was competitive roller skating. The toe stops, you're jumping on toe stops and they keep turning on you. And somebody told me a long time ago, decades ago, take the screw out, put some wax on it, put it back in. You know what? They never moved. So I do that all the time on bolts. Everybody always knew when I had the store, knew when I was done doing whatever I needed to do to it, because I'd pull those bolts out, put the wax on it, put them back in, and we're done. And they don't come loose. So, just maintaining, the bow is going to help you keep that bow in good condition. Now, you want to regularly inspect, that you want to regularly inspect it. Don't just take, a short period of time and do it once in a while. Pay attention to that. Whether you're doing it weekly or monthly, whatever you want to do, just make sure you keep doing that. Now, if we look at crossbows, those are going to have the same basic stuff. You want to examine it for wear. There's a few other things you want to look at in there for that. Um, there's it's basically just the same thing. You want to visually inspect it, make sure everything is good. If you have a scope on it, you want to make sure that's lined up. Those bolts are tight as well. Um, you know, you also have your cocking device, whatever that is, whether it's when you just hook on the strings and pull it back or a crank, you want to inspect those as well so that you can, make sure those are in good condition. Because last thing you do is get ready to cock your crossbow, and next thing you know, you have uh, your string fails on you. So you always want to make sure you have that inspected as well. And same thing, use the cotton ball to rub on the surfaces of the limbs. You still have the strings and cables. You want to check your strings and cables, see if they're frayed or broken. Um, Now on the crossbows, you have, where your trigger is, because they have a trigger on them. So um, you want to make sure that there's nothing in there, like, any rust or any damage. You want to make sure that the button moves smoothly. Your stock, you want to inspect that stock to make sure there's no cracks or anything in there in the damage. Um, Attachment points where you have on the stock, you have other things you can fasten onto and make sure those are all done. Like the stirrup, you want to make sure that is fastened on there, not loose. As last one do is walking out to your tree stand, and you get up in your tree stand, and next thing you know, you got to put your foot in the stirrup and it's gone. You're not going to cock that bow without that stirrup. That's a little bit tough, because now you don't have any place to put your foot to work on it. So it'd be a little bit different, but you want to make sure you check that. You also want to check your bolts to make sure they fit properly. They're the correct size and weight for the crossbow. Now, if you use the same ones that come with the bow or is recommended manufacturer, you shouldn't have to worry about that. It's when you buy a different one that you got to make sure that it is the same type. You have different nocks on them. You have your flat nocks, you have your half moon nocks, you have your nocks that kind of look a little bit like a regular nock on an arrow. You want to make sure you're using the right one for your bow, because using the wrong one, it's not going to work too well. And then, make sure, everything is bolted down, it's all tight. Make sure that's all good. You want to inspect your inspect your nocks to make sure they're not damaged. There's, they can easily get damaged as well. You want to lubricate the moving parts just like you do on any other compound, and check the bolts, make sure they're tight. Now, the same thing with a compound as well as a crossbow, you never want to dry fire them. The problem with a crossbow, when you dry fire them, there's a good chance, um, better chance than not, you're going to cause significant damage, because they're a whole lot higher pressure. They're, your compound bows, they may up to 70 pounds. Well, your crossbows are going to be 125, 150, 175 pounds. And when those go off without a bolt in it, they do cause a lot of damage. And then, at least, once a year, just like you do in your compound, you want to check it up. Have checkups. If you don't know how to do it, take it in a bow shop. Let them check it over. They know how to work with them. And that's just one of the things that, having a good shop is there. If you don't have a good shop real close by, then you may want to go, um, you know, take some lessons to learn how to work on it. You can find some place that will teach you how to work on them. That can always be a good thing. Sometimes YouTube channels are good. Sometimes they're not. It just depends on how good they are. So if you're watching YouTube videos, you know, take a look at them and see. You have to use your own judgment whether that person running that YouTube channel actually knows what they're doing. There are a lot of good ones out there. So, and the Arch Talk 101 group, we have a lot of experienced bow techs in the group as well as instructors. So, if you're having questions, post it in the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group because they're gonna help you out. The same thing with the compound bow. You want to wax your string. You want to regularly wax that. That help keeps it from fraying. And then you want to replace them if you see any kind of damage or any wear on a crossbow string, especially on a crossbow string. You want to replace it as quick as you can. Now, you have a couple more things to lubricate on a crossbow. You have the rail that the string actually rides across that rail. So it's rubbing all that distance. So you want to make sure you have rail lube on there so that you keep that string from wearing as much. And then there's other moving parts. You've got your trigger that you need to make sure you keep clean and lubricated. One thing you probably don't want to use is a lot of oils because oils attract dust and dust gums up your mechanism. So take a look at the owner's manual, see what they recommend. There's a lot of things you can do. Sometimes the gun cleaner has a Teflon coating that leaves behind, but you want to check and see from the manufacturer, is that something you can use in there, or maybe they have a special oil that they recommend. Just look at the owner's manual. And if you don't, then get a hold of the company that made it. Same thing with compounds, what you're going to lube. There's not as many moving parts on a compound as there is in a crossbow. So just take care of that. And same thing with the compounds and the crossbows. If you have dirt and grime, you want to remove them. You can blow it off with an air compressor or soft cloth or anything, especially if you're in dusty conditions. Those cams can actually get some dirt in them. You get dirt inside your string. That's why you want to keep it waxed. It helps keeps that dust out of your string because any dust in your string is going to wear it even quicker. Now at the scope, we have the scope. You want to clean that as well. Make sure you use the correct cleaning solution. It's something designed for optics. That there's a solution that is designed for cleaning like scopes and binoculars and glasses because those are all you want to clean the optics. You don't want to get them scratched. So don't just take I got dirt on there and take your rag and just wipe in there because you can start scratching that lens, and then that can degrade the quality of your scope, being able to see anything. And then again, you want to make sure your screws and bolts are tight. Like we talked about earlier, you want to make sure that you don't have, um, anything come falling off. That would not be good. Now, one of the things you want to store your crossbows and your compound bows and pretty much any bow in a cool, dry place. That prevents rust and damage. You know, on your crossbow, avoid leaving it cocked for extended periods of time. That can do limb failure. Now, compounds are designed to be always um, stored in that state, but it's a relaxed state. With the crossbows, the relaxed state is with it not cocked. If you cock that crossbow for a long period of time, you have a lot of pressure. And if for some reason that string would break, while it's under pressure, you just dry fired your crossbow, and you don't want to do that. So never store it cocked. In fact, when you're getting in the tree, it should be uncocked. And when you're getting down from the tree, you want it uncocked as well. The only time you cock it when you're in your tree stand is when you're up in there and you're going to uncock it. So lots of times you'll take, there's bolts you can use designed for uncocking. They're biodegradable. You can shoot them once and let them go. Or you can just carry a field tip in there and then shoot it, in the ground. Hopefully, if you're not where there's a lot of rocks, shoot it in the ground. If so, then the regular decocking bolts are probably cheaper. So you want to make sure that you don't carry them in the cocked position because that can cause problems. If you're walking through the field, let's say walking through the field, you have it cocked ready to go, and just walking in, you're not actually stalking, and you have it cocked. And all of a sudden you catch something and the pressure on it because just a little sharp edge will cut right through that string, especially on tension. You just dry fired it. So now, if you're doing a spot and stock where you're going up and you're sneaking up on one, you're going to need to have it cocked. But that's a little different than just walking to and from, your hunting area. And then just like with compounds, crossbows, you want to inspect the bolts, make sure they're straight. And anything that's bent or damaged, you want to get rid of it. Don't try and shoot it out of a crossbow because it's even worse than shooting out of a compound. And then, once again, you don't want that, you know, crossbow service, take it to somebody who knows how to do it. If you don't know how to do, the whole complete annual checkup, it's a good idea once a year. Um, have I done mine once a year? No, but I look at them, I check them periodically, and if I see a problem, then I'll take care of it. So that's it for the compounds and crossbows. So we want to go take a look at traditional equipment because those have a little bit different things that we want to look at. Because a lot of those have the limbs are wood, or they could be fiberglass, or they could be, pretty much, fiberglass or wood. The risers are either wood or metal, depending on which one you have. There again, you want to take a look at the limbs because now those are wood. Like we're going to assume that for traditional ones you're using a wood limbs, whether it be a recurve or longbow, and you want to check those for cracks and splits, and also they can warp. Especially if you have it stored, like you lean it up against something, it's not, pretty like you could be bending one of those. Over time, that wood is going to go to whatever position it's in. That's why you want to probably hang them horizontally on a couple of pins so they're sitting normal. Don't lean them against the wall because they will eventually, warp a little bit. And there again, use the cotton to go, gently check it, for any problems in there. And then you can flex it too as well. You want to look for any sounds. If you're shooting and you hear a weird sound, that's not, well, not weird, but it could be something different. You want to look at that and say, okay, what's going on? You may need to have somebody help you flex it part way and have them check it while it's partially flexed because it could be a damage that at rest it's not seeing anything, and when you string it you might not see anything, but if you pull back of it you might find something. So that's something you want to do. If they're unstrung, you can always just flex one, work on one at a time, and then look at the other one, but you want to look at them and make sure there's no damage. And then because they use strings, they don't have cables, but just strings, you want to make sure they're not frayed or broken strands or anything like that. Make sure the end loops are good. The center serving is good because you're going to have more center serving. It's a bit more important on traditional equipment because you have more of a chance of hitting your arm with them. So you want to make sure you inspect that center serving. If you're getting it turning white someplace, if you have a black string, let's say it's a black string, and it's turning white someplace, that's wear. So you don't want to have anything turn white. If it does, it's probably hitting something. If it's hitting your arm, you might need to put more serving on. If it's hitting somewhere else, then you might want to serve that. Now we don't have as much axle, but we have brace height, and you want to make sure that you have the correct number of twists in them. You know, too many or not enough can affect the way it shoots. You want to make sure that you have that amount of twists in there. Whether you take and okay, I know this is going to be this long, so I can measure my string. It needs to be exactly this long, and you can set up or do that. If you don't ever take a string completely off, then once it's set, it's there. But if you take it completely off, it could easily turn on you a little bit. So if you're going to take them off, what I recommend is like, just take it off, put the two loops together, maybe put a little twist eye in there, so it won't twist on you. Otherwise, it could twist on you, untwist, and then you're having other problems. Um, let's check your riser. Make sure there's no cracks in there, especially around the limb pockets. If you have removable limbs, you want to check around those limb pockets as well and make sure there's no cracks there or any defects where the sight mounts, because a lot of times those are just a hole drilled in them with an insert, threaded insert put in there. And then check in any place there might be any bolts in there or any screws to put anything on it. Make sure those are secured, correctly. You know, like the case for all of them, you want to check them bolts and screws, make sure they're on there tight. Brace height. That's one thing that you can look at. You know what your brace height is. Once you get what you're set up, and all the process going, you set it up, you know what it's supposed to be, so you can always check it when you put your string on, make sure it's the right one. it could change. It can, if it changes on you, then you need to look and say, okay, why is it changing? Why is my braith height now all of a sudden a quarter inch shorter? Well, probably because your string stretched, but you want to check it out. Uh, now that the knock point, you want to make sure that knock point is in the correct position on your string. Um, if that arrow is knocking a different spot, it's going to shoot differently. Especially for those that do the string walking, that knock point is very important because you're counting, you know, loops of the serving for your send. You're going down there a certain number, and if your knock point changes, it's going to change all that. So you just want to make sure that knock point is where it's supposed to be and it's secured. Um, you can, there's all kinds of different ways you can make sure it doesn't move. You can put something on there, maybe if you just tie, like a little red piece of string on there right above that, and you'll know where it's supposed to be. If it's all of a sudden going over that red thing, it's moved up or down. Um, Generally move up, because the pressure you're putting on is going to move up. That's why you put a knock point above the arrow, not below, because that keeps it from moving up your string. And your arrow rest, just like on the other ones, you're going to have an arrow rest, whether it's a plunger type or a stick-on type. You want to make sure it's not worn out and it's working like it's supposed to. Um, if you have a plunger on there, then you want to be able to depress it and make sure it works smoothly and it's not sticky, because that's going to change, because it's designed to move out of the way a little bit. If it's not moving, then that can kick your arrow out and make it, not in a good flight. Now, if you're using sights or stabilizers, some do, some don't. It depends on what style you're shooting. You want to make sure that they're firmly attached on and not loose. That can change the way things work. Because if your stabilizer is loose, it can be vibrating, and then maybe it's not making or allowing the bow to act like it's supposed to. If your sight's loose, every time you shoot, it could be changing. I had that on when I was shooting a different weapon, and the front sight was loose. So every time I was shooting, I kept chasing stuff around. It's like, oh, it's loose, so just tightened it back up. Uh, Now, the same thing with storage on uh, your traditional equipment. You want to store it at room temperature. It prevents moisture and damage from warping and stuff like that. Um, if it does get wet, you want to take and make sure you dry it off. If you have if you have any damage on there, like especially on the wood, if you have a scratch in the finish on there, well, now you've exposed probably bare wood. That wood's going to absorb moisture, and humidity. And now then all of a sudden it can start changing the things. It can wear them. So you want to look at if you have a scratch or a chip in the finish only, not in the wood itself, then you want to take and fix that. Whether it's putting on tongue oil or whatever. Get with the manufacturer what they recommend, how to repair a little crack in the finish and not in the wood itself. If you have somebody made a bow for you, get with them and find out what they're using, what their recommendation is. But you don't want to leave it undone. You know, Bows are going to get banged up. That's just part of the game. But you just need to know what to do to take care of it when it does get scratched. It's not like the aluminum razors that, you know, if you scratch some of the coating off, it's still aluminum. It's not going to rust or warp or anything from there. So you want to check that for damage. Um, and then just like your strings, you want to make sure you maintain the strings and wax them. If you see fraying, fraying, you want to make sure you get it replaced. And on recurs, it's not quite as much pressure. You might be able to go, 2 or 3 years, if before it shows sign of wear. Of course, it depends on how much you shoot. If you shoot, you know, 300-400 arrows a week, it's going to be wear out quicker than somebody that shoots 50 hours a week or 50 arrows a week. So that's just something you want to look at. Make sure you're inspecting those limbs, um, to make sure that you have, um, some good, good limbs. And let's see, I think that's pretty much, yeah, you just like in the other ones, you want to keep them clean, wipe them down, keep them dry. Um, you want to go through your tuning process with them so that you can, make sure it's well tuned. You're going to go through your setup process when you first get the bow to tune it to fit you. And then periodically you might want to go back and redo that. Whether or not it's once a year, some will go through it, more often than not. And then, something too, you can have your, set up annual checkup with somebody that can inspect it if, now this is all, if you don't know for sure what you're doing, sometimes it's better to get in there with somebody that knows what's going on, and that way they can help you. Or a lot of them, it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm checking for, this is what I'm doing. Now if it needs a bow press, like your compounds and your crossbows, if you don't have a bow press, you're going to have to take it in to a shop that has a bow press that can press them, because you're not going to be able to take the axles out and clean them. And one of the things I did when I take an axle, I take the clip pin off one side, and as I'm pushing it out, I'm putting another pin in there, so that now that I have everything still lined up and get ready to get the new one cleaned, I can go through and I can run throbs through there, clean it, keep it all set all together. And then that way, it's easy to put back in. Everything's all back the same. It's not cleaned and lubed. So that's something you want to make sure you do. With the traditional equipment, you don't have the cams and the axles that you have to worry about, and you just have the brake size, not axle to axle. So, you know, by going through and doing some of this preventative maintenance stuff, that is definitely going to keep your equipment in better shape and working better longer. You can easily have a bow for 30, 40 years easy. Um, that's my two main bows. One's from 2001, the other one's from 2003, and they're still working just fine. So just keep them working. And now the bows that have the old steel cables on them, if those steel cables go out, buy a new bow. You can buy a new bow cheaper. You can get those fixed. Because one thing you have to go through, and you got to find some cables for them, which could be impossible. They could be $100 to $200 a piece. You have to replace both of them. And then you're going to have to pay somebody to replace them to make the new cables that knows what they're doing. And they're probably going to charge you $300 to $400 just to replace them, because, if you mess a cable up, now that's another cost in there. So if you have one of the steel cables on it and you start having the cable go bad, just hang it up. It's decoration for the wall. So that's something you just have to deal with some of the really old bows, because you're not likely going to find those steel cables anymore. And the amount of work it take to replace, everything out and turn it into a bow that doesn't use the steel cables. Yeah, you're just better off to buy a new one. Even the low end bows are going to be cheaper than trying to fix up an old one like that. Um, Now, if it has a sentimental value in it, just hang it up on the wall and keep it. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to Arch Talk 101. Don't forget you can join the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group, where um, we record this live, and then you can also get the replays in the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group, as well as you can go out to my YouTube channel, Learn to Fix It Yourself, and they're out there as well. And then you can also go to archtalk101.com. And then once again, for those that'd rather listen to the podcast, you can go out to Spotify and Audible and listen to them there for free. And remember, keep your equipment in good shape, and that way you're always going to have that good shot. And when you shoot, you don't have to worry about your equipment failing. If you miss your shot, it's because you were the weak point and not the bow. So keep that in mind, and we'll see you on the next one. And we'll take in. I think we have an interview coming up next I'll have to look at my schedule to see what's up next, but we'll have something coming out, and then let's keep this going. And remember, if you have questions, get a hold of us. We're glad to help you out in any way you can. You can get a hold of me either through my YouTube channel or on the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group. If you have any questions on equipment or shooting, we can help you with that. So thanks for listening or watching, whichever one you're doing, and we'll see you on the next one.